Welcome to AlexGs Aquarium, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about glass installation on the 4,200 gallon aquarium. This was the most stressful job of this build to date, and I could not have finished it without the help of my good friends Jim and Jeff. Thank you so much for your help with glass installation. I couldn't have done it without you. And to compound the difficulty and stress of this job, my plan that I spent quite a bit of time creating to install the glass fell apart in about 3 to 5 minutes. So again, thank you Jim, Jeff, for all your help. I'm going to talk about the whole process here of glass installation today. I'm going to go over the product that I chose to seal the glass, talk about why. I'm going to dive a little bit into the method that I use to install the glass and how I tested it. Then I'm going to talk about some final preparation steps that I took to get the glass ready for installation. And we're going to go through the installation process and a little bit of post-installation work that was also completed. So this is going to be a long video. I will talk about what worked well in my plans, what did not work well, and ultimately how I got the glass installed. First topic I want to cover today is the product I chose to seal the glass in this aquarium, and I chose to use ASI Aquarium sealant. It's a pretty well-known brand. Now this is the first time I've ever used it, although I gotta say I've now used more of this product than any of the past products I've used for sealing up my DIY aquariums. And if you have watched my videos over the years, you know that I was a huge fan of Momentive RTV 108, and I did compare this product to that. Now, this is a sealant and not an adhesive. Sometimes the lines of that can be a little blurry, but this is an aquarium specific made product, and when you look at the manufacturer spec sheets for both products, they are pretty darn close to each other. They're both very strong. This is meant to be submerged, and ultimately I was going to do some testing between the two products, and I did attempt something which I'll show a picture of here, where I actually tested a couple pieces of glass and started hanging buckets filled with rocks and steel from them to see how much weight it would take to shear them off. Now, they did both eventually fail, but I found that I had not waited long enough for either one of the products to fully cure, and because it wasn't a fair test and a repeatable test, it just wasn't worth sharing any of it. I will say though, it was a ridiculous amount of weight it took to shear these off with a very small amount of product at an 1/8 inch wide seal, which is what I was going for here. So I have no doubt at any part that the strength is going to be a problem. This product is being used more in a seal capacity than a strength anyways, because the glass sits inside of the beams on the top and the bottom, so it really doesn't have anywhere to go because it's up against a solid structure like that. So it's more for a seal is what I'm using this product for. Now, when I did my testing with methods and such, I did find that this ASI was just a little nicer for this little applicator tip they have on here. It's a little longer, a little finer, and you could swap them out real easy. So if you cut a tip the way you like it for application of the product, you could swap it between tubes, which is pretty easy and nice to use. So that's the product I chose, and I'm going to talk more about this as we talk about method. When it comes to glass installation, there are two methods in which I am familiar. The first is compression, and the other is called injection. Compression is something I have done quite a bit with all of my plywood aquariums, pond liner aquariums, and it is very simple. You put a bead of your silicone product onto one of your pieces of glass or onto your tank surface, and then you simply compress it into the other part of the seal and put your spacers between it, and you have compressed that seal and it's done. The other method that I have been reading quite a bit about and thought would be interesting to try is called injection. And injection, if you're talking about a full-on glass aquarium, essentially what I've seen done is they assemble all the pieces of glass with the spacers in them. They'll usually tape them up and clamp them up, and they will simply inject the silicone product between the two pieces of glass straight into it. So there is no need to assemble, it's already done, and you could simply just inject that silicone product. For this build, I kind of was thinking I might need to do a hybrid option, and I was looking for what will work very quickly. I was very intrigued by injection, however, I had never actually done it before. When it comes to the injection method of silicone on an aquarium, as a big DIY advocate, I'm willing to try new ideas. However, I always want to do testing. I did a lot of testing in this build with different methods of doing things, and once I had done test pieces and I was comfortable, I would integrate it into the build or my plans for getting something constructed. No different with silicone injection here. So I started off by making up a mock-up test bed as close as I could to what I would be doing to seal the aquarium here. Now the main seals on this tank are 2 inches tall by 1/8 of an inch wide. And there's over 168 feet of seal like that, and that doesn't include all the vertical seams. So there's a lot of seal area here. And I thought injection might help with this. So I started my test by taking a piece of 1/4 inch acrylic. I had some scrap laying around, made a piece of wood and held it in place with the same spacers that are 1/8 inch wide to hold this piece of acrylic in place. And the whole idea was real simple. Let's see if we can inject it. Now at this point in time, I was still experimenting with Momentive RTV 108 and with ASI. And this first test I did here was really simple and rudimentary. I literally put the tip of the applicator right into the seal and just started to push the product in here with the electric caulking gun. When I did this, it started to go into the seal, but it very quickly started piling up on the outside and would not get injected inside. And I was like, I kind of thought this might happen because you have an immense amount of back pressure building as you're pushing this product out of the tube and it goes inside the seal. Well, it's pushing back, and this silicone is going to look for the path of least resistance. So if it can go out, up and out on the sides, it will do that. And that's exactly what happened in these first 2 tests. So to counteract that, I had a very simple and novel idea. I took another clear piece of acrylic and I took my Dremel tool with a little burr attachment and just ground out a little notch here, just so that you can get the tip of your silicone tube in there. The idea with this is simple. I put this up against my acrylic, I put the tip of the silicone applicator in there, and as I put it in and I drag this across, it will force that silicone down into the seal. And this was my first full-scale test of that right here, and it was successful. So that was a very good thing that I was successful with this test. However, I wanted to do a little bit more testing because another question I needed to answer too is, how much of this am I supposed to order for 168 feet of seal, and then all my vertical seams, and then additional glass plates? Now there are caulk calculators on the internet that you tell it the depth and width of the seal that you're going to be injecting your caulk product into, and it will tell you how far one tube goes. One problem with that though, it is using exact math. So you're never going to be able to exactly get the distance you think you will with a tube of silicone. And it actually said for a 2-inch wide by 1/8 inch wide seal, a whole tube of this should theoretically go 6 feet. And I just said, I don't believe that. But let's do some practical testing. Again, I went ahead and started off by using a piece of 1/4 inch acrylic, and part of it's behind the wall here, but I set it up the same way and tried this injection test, and I considered it a failure because this 1/4 inch acrylic actually started to bow out from the pressure of the silicone being injected, It's just not rigid enough. And I didn't think it was a fair test for me to really understand how much silicone I use. So I got another tube out because I bought some practice tubes. And then I said, I have some scrap 3/4 inch glass that I had from my old 480 and 720 gallon plywood tanks. This was one of the cross braces. And I had trimmed the edges on it. So I had this piece here and I said, this will be perfect. I'm using the right thickness of glass, the right width of the seal, and I can hold it in even with the 1/2 inch spacer, well, even with the spacer below, so I can monitor this. Now, when I did this same test, the one problem I faced also is if I'm standing outside the aquarium to inject this silicone, how am I going to know if the product has made it in? So I actually got a mirror out and set up a mirror so that while I'm doing this, I could look at a mirror and actually see the injection taking place. Now I went through this and I didn't quite use a whole tube, I only had a partial tube here, but I was able to get this full distance, and then I essentially said, okay, based on the amount that I have, I estimate that a tube should really go about 4 feet with some squeeze out and extra. And that's how I ordered my silicone initially, was based on just all the seals that I had. I did it at 4 feet per tube. Now I will caveat this, is that there's 2 phases of this glass installation. One is the 9 main panels of glass. A secondary installation is all the corner doubling plates and butt joint plates, which you can call them armored corners if you want. They're just stiffening plates and protective plates for those seals. But that's going to happen a few weeks after the glass is installed. So by ordering all of that silicone at once, I actually was ordering to have approximately 3 feet per tube for the 9 main panels of glass. I had a couple of tubes on hand. I ordered another 48 tubes of silicone. Now, the silicone came in and they had a little bit of a mix-up, and they sent me a case of clear that was a 24 count and a case of black that was a 24 count, and I just kind of went, you know what, I'm not going to fuss about this. So I decided black on the bottom and clear on the vertical seams in the top, and we'll be done with it. So now I have confidence in my compression method already. I have tested this injection method. I am satisfied this will work. Why go through all this? Why go for injection if I know compression already? Well, this is a lot of glass, and products like this, it's very important to understand the skin time of your product. So with ASI, you got a 10-minute skin time. So that means once the product has been extruded out of the tube, you got about 10 minutes before the surface of it begins the curing process. At that point, it is not going to adhere as well. So by doing injection, I was wanting to speed up the process of glass installation and make it a little easier. One more thing I wanted to talk about real quick with the testing of the silicone. When I was doing my injection testing, I had experimented with heating these tubes up. I believe they could be brought up to about 120 degrees as their max storage temp. So I would put them in a water bath at about 100 degrees. And the idea was to see if I could lower the viscosity of the product and it would run a little smoother for injection. It made a very slight amount of difference, but nothing very significant. It was something I tried and I do this during the actual install too, but overall I didn't notice a huge difference. Planning for the installation itself of this glass was very, very important. Now, I did a lot of prep work in my previous video, but the actual installation plan was so important. I needed to have an order in which I was going to install the pieces of glass, and then understand what method of installation I was going to do for each one. And the plan went as follows when I started. First, on the front of the short L of the tank, I would install the very first 6-foot piece of glass with the injection method. Glass could sit exactly where it is, it doesn't need to move. followed by the short L 12-foot piece of glass, which would also use the injection method. From here on out, this 6-foot piece here, right to my left, would need to be a little bit of a hybrid. To get around the corner post here, I would have to do a mix of compression in the corner by the post and injection for the rest of it. The same with this 12-footer here. I would lean it out, do some compression behind the post, inject the rest. The back 12-footer, same thing. A small amount of compression, inject the rest. The most difficult part was going to be the back two panels that are around 10-foot panels. Now those I was going to have to do full compression because I could not reach them. So I needed to lean those pieces of glass out. When they're leaned out, I could seal each one of them with the compression method and then move on to the next panel. Then the front 12-footer on this side would also be injection. And the most difficult piece of all would be my overflow piece on the end with all the overflow holes, because that piece I needed to actually swing it out, because the rear piece of glass, which is a bit of a flaw in my method of installation in ordering the glass that way, required that piece to be moved out. So I'd have to inject that back piece, slide that piece in, and then finish the seal there. It's 9 pieces of glass. I figured it would take about 90 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how it goes. And that was the plan. Now, as all this glass is being installed with the injection method or the compression method, I'd have someone in the tank holding a mirror for me. We'll also be putting in wooden bracing to support the glass as it's installed. Another person would be outside the tank, handing me silicone tubes, cutting the tips off of them, and that was the plan. Of course, this plan doesn't exactly work, so we'll have to wait a little bit till we talk about actual installation. Now, one other thing that I did to aid in this process is I made up a few extra glass braces. These were ones that were specifically made for the installation of the glass. Now, I made 2 here, which I've got a picture of. Now, I called them Nebulon B frigates, so if you're a Star Wars fan, you might get the reference. But these braces were intended to allow me and one of my friends to have lean a piece of glass out for the compression method in the back, or any of the others, allow me to get the silicone onto it without someone having to hold up a 200 to 400 pound piece of glass, and then we could just lean it back in and be done with it. So nice and easy. That's the plan. I also made a couple of little skid lifts for that end piece of glass too, to just hold it in place, put it on some PVC sliders so that it could easily be slid and moved into position very gently. Well, it's the day of the installation. It's time to do some final prep work here on all the glass and do some last run-throughs with my friends Jeff and Jim. Now that morning I started off by cleaning all the glass seals with isopropyl alcohol. I cleaned them off with paper towel, I vacuumed, I cleaned the inside of the tank, the outside of the tank, I vacuumed the floor. I did everything I could to get everything as clean as possible. I got all my silicone tubes ready. I had all my injection plates of acrylic with the little notches cut out placed around the tank. I had some extra PVC spacers. I had some Gatorade sitting around. And I also turned on the bathroom fan and cracked the window a bit, because I knew there was going to be a ton of acetic acid fumes coming in here from all of the silicone that was going to be going in. My friends Jeff and Jim arrived. We spent about 30 minutes to an hour going through the plan and also just having fun and talking a little bit before we started everything. So Jeff got in the tank. He was going to be the mirror holder, the brace holder, and then when it got to the back compression areas, I'd hop in the tank and help out with that. Jim was on silicone. He'd be handing me tubes out of the water bath and drying them off and opening them up for me, and I'd basically be asking for him either black tubes for the bottom or clear tubes for the verticals and tops. And from there on out, I was ready to go. All set. Time to start this installation. Started on this front piece here, and as soon as I started this, I was so happy to be getting this going. I was like, I got a plan, I'm practiced, my friends here know what to do with me, and I got confidence that we're going to get this job done. It's just a matter of getting through this job. And once you start, you really can't stop. That's the way I looked at this. And this is about the time when the plan started to crumble. My very first tubes of silicone, where I was doing the black ASI on the bottom seal with injection, started off great. The plate was working well. Everything was doing well. I had my battery operated caulking gun here on one of the lowest speeds, which is not very fast, but the idea was is once the silicone gets its injection started, you just start dragging it along and it will go in nice and easy, and I was so happy for this. That was until the first tube of silicone was emptied after about 2 feet. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. And I'm asking my friend Jeff in the tank, I go, is there a lot of squeeze out on the bottom? He goes, no, it's like perfect. Okay, so I, at this point, the caulking gun's like this, and I go to pull it out, and it's not moving. So finally I hear a big sucking sound as I pull this out. I pull my tube out, and about a third of my tube of silicone is behind the plunger in back here in the back of the caulking gun, which is why this thing is such an absolute mess here, covered in silicone. And I thought, well, that's weird. Must have been a bad tube or something weird, because I practiced with this. This did not happen during testing. I tried again and blew out another tube, and then another tube. Then I went to the top and I said, let me try this for this and finish this, and each one, the tube only made it about 2 feet and blew out the back of the tube. So at this point I start to panic a little bit, because now I'm going, I don't have enough silicone for this. I ordered 48 tubes on the premise of really ideally thinking I'd use 1 tube per 4 feet, but then I had a backup to do about 1 tube per 3 feet. So I had a little extra. I did not have enough to cover 1 tube every 2 feet. Just didn't have it. I stopped. I was probably upset, said a few things, I'm sure, as I'll have to review that tape to make this video. But I started going, what am I going to do? And I looked at Jim and Jeff and I go, I think we might have to stop. Like, I don't know what to, like, I was like, let me think for a minute, because at the same time, my skin time is ticking. And I'm like, if I'm going to make a decision, I have to do it now. And this is where I went to plan B on the fly. Now, injection failed. It was too thick of a seal, and that pack pressure was blowing the tubes out, and it just wasn't going to work, despite not working during testing. So I thought, well, what can I do? I gotta have to go to all compression. Can I do that now? And the answer was yes. However, I needed to do a couple of things I was not planning to do. And the various one I had was the 12-foot piece of glass on the back of the tank was in the way of being able to lean out the short L 12-footer. It was in the way, and the only way to be able to do compression was to take that next piece of glass and lean it out and start on that. So I hopped in the tank with a suction cup real quick. We dragged that piece of glass out a foot or two, and thankfully I had made those Nebulon Frigate B braces, because I did not intend us to have to use them as much as we did, and without them we would have been in big trouble. So compression, I already knew roughly the size of the bead of silicone I needed. I was able to tell Jim to cut an aggressive tip on the silicone tube so more product would come out faster. I turned the caulking gun up higher and I started laying down tubes. And we went from each piece as much as we could. There was a couple little areas I had a little difficulty in, and it got a little sloppy in the corner here, but we got the silicone in. And it's got plenty of seal. Now, the one thing that happened that was probably the most precarious moment of this glass installation then, other than just the high stress level of this isn't going to plan and I can't stop now, I have to go fast, Jeff did an amazing job putting in bracing. Jim was handing me tubes. Get to the back pieces of glass here where I knew I had to do compression, and the acetic acid fumes almost got to me. We had to crack the window way open. Hanging over the top of a piece of glass, when you put down about 8 tubes of silicone within a few minutes, it's a lot of acetic acid. And I was probably pretty close to passing out. But I said, let me step back for a few minutes. We got time. So I leaned back and I got some air, got a little Gatorade in me, and I was like, okay, I'm good now. I just needed some fresh air. Got that piece of glass on, did the second one. The end piece was a little precarious just because sliding that end piece of glass in, you just had to be so careful that you didn't smash into one of the sides because it had a very, very tight tolerance there of the 1/8" spacers. But it worked perfectly. We got all the glass in, and I was happy with the results of it. Now, the seal itself has an unbroken line all the way around the tank, top and bottom. It worked the way it should. So, super excited there that it turned out good. We used about 49.5 tubes of silicone in total to get that part of the job done. I gotta say, when that got done, I was so stressed out because it literally just took every ounce of energy I had, and with all the stress and everything, to get this done. But if I didn't have Jeff and Jim here, there's just no way it would have happened. I could not have done this job by myself. If anything, I probably needed 1 or 2 more people with more of these caulking guns. Now, I did have a spare manual one in case, but that would have been insane to even attempt to try and do that. So overall, that installation went well with these 9 sheets of glass, just incredibly stressful. And I know I'm rambling on here, but it's hard to depict just how big an event this was to get done in this build. With that done though, good news is I was able to get all the bracing in. It all went in fine. All the spacers look good. As each piece of glass got compressed in, we just put the spacers in place. I had squeeze out on top and bottom. Now I let that sit for at least a week there, and then I started going through with single edge razor blades and also hooked utility knife blades. And with this, it's a very delicate operation. You don't want to press too hard with those blades, but you're trying to cut your excess silicone off top and bottom in the corners. One other thing I wanted to mention here too is the installation of all the vertical seams. I still use the injection method successfully there. It's the one place that it was very successful because it was just a narrow channel it needed to go through. So injection worked there, just not on a 2" wide by 1/8" wide seal. So that's a little note there. Now, after I went ahead and let the tank sit for approximately 3 weeks, I got a little bit more aggressive on removing excess silicone on all the interior corners and butt joints in preparation for the doubling plates to go on there, or some people call them armored seams. The idea of these was I did want to protect those seams. I also just wanted to strengthen them more, and putting in pieces of 1/2" glass on there and fully sealing them in would do that, and just add more strength, rigidity, and also it would also significantly increase the thickness of the seal there on those corners. So that's why I did that. Now, the cleanup of those corners and butt joints, there were 9 of them. In order to do that again, I got out the razor blades, isopropyl alcohol, spotlight, and flashlights, and literally you got to clean these like you're cleaning off glass for a reseal. So any little bit of silicone left, it's not going to stick properly. Now I know the silicone to silicone is not going to stick well, but the glass on glass connection, I wanted to be as perfect as I could. With those, I was just using my old method of zip ties for spacers on them, which they're about a 1/16 to 3/32 thick. And for that, once I had everything cleaned off, well inspected, I went ahead and ordered more silicone because I used all my reserve in the main part of the glass install, and went ahead and installed all those glass plates. You know, real simple. I just did compression with a real big bead. Some of them did get some bubbling in them. I'm not really worried about it because it's such a thick seal. It's not going to make a difference. Now, this kind of leads into removing all the bracing after several weeks, and the total cure time I was looking for here was a minimum of 10 weeks. I ended up going more realistically around 12 weeks of full cure before anything else was done. Now, on top of all the silicone cleanup and everything, on the bottom and top seal, I had a continuous seal all the way around, but there were a few areas that had variations of thickness, and this is why I went with a 2-inch wide seal. It's overkill for this build. I could have gotten away with a lot less thickness there and it would have been just fine. Going with this seal allowed me to have a little bit of extra playroom. So I did go in and I injected in silicone top and bottom just to even it out. Now I want to caution everyone here. Silicone does not stick to silicone all that great once it's cured. And if you have holes in it, or breaks or tears in your seal, it will not necessarily give you a watertight seal. And unfortunately, the only way to really get around that is to kind of clean the whole thing up and reseal it, which really is not ideal. So the fact that I had a good continuous seal all the way around made this a lot easier to deal with. And so I did do some filling, top and bottom, just to even it out. Gives it a little bit more of a structural bond. Once that was done, I went ahead and just did inspections and some more exterior silicone cleanup just to get off excess from when I did injection. Well, that's the installation of the glass. I hope you enjoyed the video. This was a monumental process to get here, and if you haven't noticed yet, I'll let you in on a little secret. The aquarium's full of water. As of the filming of this video, the aquarium has been completely filled for 4 days. I'm going to let it go a total of 3 weeks at full capacity. I spent roughly 2 weeks fill testing the tank up to about 2/3 capacity to where my overflows were until I finished that plumbing. At that point in time, I went ahead and filled it up all the way when the plumbing was done. So it's operating on its own closed loop temporary sump tank that it'll have for the next several months. I know a lot of people have been asking for the glass installation video, but I didn't want to release this video until I had some time with this tank being full to make sure my methods and everything were successful. And so far, everything is going to plan. We will see how it goes in the upcoming weeks. If all goes to plan, the tank will be drained, aquascaped, and then refilled with RODI water and then salt. It's time to get this aquarium running. I'm sure you noticed too, there's a lot of work being done on the exterior finishing. It's not done yet. I'm getting a little bit further in it every day. And that's the video. If you liked it, go ahead, give it a thumbs up. If you have comments or questions, go ahead, leave them down below. I'm always happy to share with the community. I'm also an active member in the Reef Beef Discord. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you on the next video.